European Union announced overnight that they're going to do 2 trillion. It still has to get approved by something, but basically they're doing 2 trillion. And the Netherlands was like, no, we got to do that as a loan, because originally the EU was like, well, we'll just do it as grants. We'll just do it as free money. We're just going to print 2 trillion. And that's the thing that I get on here and I make you guys, like, I at least share so you think about it and you discuss it with your friends and family. Can you print money out of thin air, and does that end well? Can you, if money is a function of production and you have no production, can you just print it and just say, well, screw it, we don't need the production? And if you can't, well, then can you loan it in a form of, it'll be paid back according to the EU, all of it by 2048? Obviously, I don't think that type of currency will be around by 2048, so I think it is just purely a wealth transfer. It's the first moment you print money, really currency, because I don't want to be disrespecting real money, like, because you can't manipulate or fake real money. But can you print currency and it still have its value? And in the first moment of printing it, absolutely, right? What you're doing is you're printing something that never existed. You're giving it to somebody else. Let's call it Delta for 25 billion, or the industry. Let's call it airlines for 25 billion. You print 25. You loan it to people that can't pay their bills now. That's why they have a problem. So they need more debt. So really, they should be bankrupt, but you delay the bankruptcy and you print this currency. What you do is you steal the purchasing power from other people that were holding those dollars. So people that had real value or fake real value in their wallet, they're holding these dollars, and you print a fake dollar and push it into the system, and you decrease the purchasing power of people who had real fake dollars. The politically correct term is it's a wealth transfer. The reality is it's theft from one party to the other party. That party being, like, I don't know, people that work at McDonald's, for example, to the shareholders of Delta. Because the shareholders of Delta, their wealth should be dropped, boom, and it shouldn't be into the billions. But what you're doing is you're taking the guy that's, fighting for a minimum wage, which actually gives him more unemployment than he understands, because economics isn't taught. And because economics isn't taught, it's just like you've got politicians and things sound great. It's like, we're going to prop the airlines up and keep the jobs around. And the reality of it is, well, you're preventing new airlines from starting up. You're preventing, like, those pilots from getting better jobs with new startups. You're preventing, like, new ideas and innovation from occurring. And if you do that long enough, then you end up in the same problem the next crisis. There is no way that we are going to bail out the airlines and politically make that work without the virus. Because in September, them and a lot of other businesses were applying for loans in the repurchase market because they couldn't make their bills. And you couldn't just be like, hey, we're doing an auto bailout again, because the American people would have revolted, right? Hey, we're going to do an airline bailout. We're going to do bailouts for the banks. We're going to do bailouts for everybody. And then the U.S. citizens, we're going to give you guys $1,200 checks if you made under $85,000 on your taxable income per individual, $160 per couple. Like, I don't think so. Like, the American people would have been like, wait a second, we're paying for this socialism of Mr. Delta and his friends who are multi-millionaires that live in waterfront property, but you're basically taxing, like, the least of these. I'm here on this platform, and I bring this up just to get you to think about this. Can you print currency out of thin air? Of course you can. Can you print money out of thin air? No, you got to dig it out of the ground, right? So if you can just print currency out of thin air and people are no better for it, and they don't know the difference, and they're like, oh, they don't know. Like, nobody understands. Like, they see that there's a $3 trillion spend by Donald J. and the rest of the Congress there, but they don't understand that swap lines to Japan is money that is not inside the government's control to create. It's a Federal Reserve, and that's $220 billion, and it's already been spent. So when you add it all up, it's kind of like the Big Bang Theory, where the universe is just infinitely expanding until it's infinitely contracting. The US dollar is like that. It's infinitely expanding on its own through these swap lines and then through these deposits. So the Bank of Japan prints that money and they give it to their big corporations, and those corporations put it into a bank account. And those banksters get to then loan money out on that deposit. So let's just say 200 billion went to one single bank. Only one person got it. they could loan over in the EU, anything outside of America, they can loan with no fractional reserve banking, meaning I have 200 billion in deposits, I can loan 200 billion in deposits. They can deposit that in a new bank, I can loan 200 billion. I can loan 200 billion. So when you create 200 billion out of thin air, you're creating a multiple in the trillions. Nobody really knows, but when you give a swap line to Japan, you're creating at least a multiple of 5, but probably more like a multiple of 10 to 15. So you're creating 1 trillion, maybe $2 trillion worth of total fake currency. That's not a problem as long as it stays in those bank accounts. But the second it gets spent, it hyperinflates. So you end up with this problem where no one really knows how many US dollars are in circulation, and it can hyperinflate at any moment. It doesn't matter what the fine-tuning math is. What matters is the principle of it. Can you print currency out of thin air and steal people's purchasing power while transferring that purchasing power to a third party? Can you do it? Yes. Do you understand what the consequences of doing it are as a central banker? Not really. It's kind of like just shooting a shot and just being like, hopefully it's somewhere downrange. I know I'm shooting it downrange, but I don't know the exact repercussion of what it's going to hit and when it's going to hit. Because you just don't know when those deposits will get loaned and when those deposits will be reimposited and then spent and then reloaned. You just don't know what the timing on it is. If you end up getting a deflationary event with that much issue, thing implodes. So it's like an infinite expansion into the universe of fakeness, and then a second that deflation occurs, it's an infinite contraction until it collapses. Debt on these balance sheets for the Federal Reserve and the US government. If you get deflation, if you spend as much money as possible and you don't actually succeed in inflation or hyperinflation, you actually get deflation, so it's a boomerang. Instead of having a culture where we deal with our problems and we're like, yeah, this is a shitty event and it's going to cause some bankruptcies and no big deal, like we'll get through it. Instead of allowing some short-term pain, and it might be 5 or 10 years, which is very short-term in the long term of things. Instead of going in '08 and going, you know what, Ford Motor, you guys figured out, GM, you guys are bankrupt, Chrysler, you guys are bankrupt, sell off your brands, sell off Ram to somebody, sell off Hummer to somebody, start selling your brands off. And let smaller entrepreneurs run these little smaller companies. Instead of allowing that to occur, we've moved into a culture of no, you can't have pain and you can't never not have growth. For some reason, it's bad for an economy to contract for 2% or 5% or 10%. We can't allow the economy to clear itself of all these bankrupt companies like Delta that are not profitable, will never be profitable, and we're not allowing new entrepreneurs to come in with new ideas. What we do is we print this currency into existence. We allow banksters and CEOs that suck at doing what they're doing. Like if you're running one of these big companies and you're applying for these big, massive loans because you're broke and you're bankrupt, well, you probably shouldn't be allowed to run that company anymore, or that company shouldn't be allowed to exist because the shareholders haven't removed terrible leadership. But they're too big to fail. So we got to keep on bailing them out because Mr. Delta tells me, Trav, we need airlines. Bro, we'll get airlines. It just might be airlines with 3 planes. Might be airlines with 2 planes. Maybe I'll have an airline and I'll fly Punta Gorda to Westboro, Massachusetts. Maybe that's what I'll do. And you can ride the T into Boston. Maybe I'll just fly a 737 back and forth every day, every 5 hours. That's what we do. What's wrong with that? The pricing would be fabulous. The entire employment staff would be 12 people. The consumer would have endless options of airlines. It wouldn't be here's your 4 or 5 airlines. The consumer would be hey, what do you want? Same thing with automobiles. It wouldn't be GM or Ford or Chrysler. It would be Hummer would be its own thing. Ram would be its own thing. The Ford F-Series truck, Super Duty, would be its own thing. There would be tons of small businesses. There'd be a lot more employment opportunity, but we won't allow that to occur because if there's a deflation, if there's a contraction, the entire system implodes, which basically means we're playing a game of musical chairs in which the entire financial system implodes. It's pretty much a fact because the way that it was set up. If it was built with real currency, or real money, I should say, it wouldn't be possible because the weights and balances would check out. For every liability, there would be some sort of real asset, some sort of real holding. There had been real money that was lent and real money that was spent. But when you create currency out of midair, you literally are robbing from the middle class and poor until there is no middle class and poor, and you're redistributing it to the absolute wealthiest, which are these major stockholders of these companies that have taken all of the profits out of these businesses, not reinvested into a spot where they're wartime ready, and they're just like, well, we'll just get a bailout. So you've created this behavioral change at the leadership of these banks and these financial institutions and these insurance agencies of straight, we're going to make profits, we're going to privatize the profits, and we're going to socialize the losses. And you just allow an environment where someone like an AOC can come up and be like, I don't know shit about how economics works, but I worked at a bar once, and I think that we should give people that work at bars money. And it's like, well, it's hard to tell that girl that you can't when we're giving it to the CEOs of Delta. So you end up in a spot where you're like, well, we'll just print until we can. The whole thing collapses because we won't allow capital to make the decisions of winners and losers. When you have a negative loss on your balance sheet or your profit, you can go, okay, I assembled resources in a way that destroyed it. I didn't create anything. If there's a profit, you created some sort of value. If there's a loss, you destroyed value. So you've got a company like Delta that's taking aircraft, which is an asset, people, which is labor, and commodity, which is oil. And they're basically burning oil inside of an asset, taking people's hours of their lives, and they're putting those three things together, and they're destroying value. Because in the short term, we won't allow the company to stop working, somebody to buy the plane at auction for a loss, which would be a win for that guy, oil to not be burned, and then this person that's flying the plane or working for the airline to go find better opportunities that will be better for them in the long term. Not just the big airlines or the financial institutions, it's the entire system, because the virus is so convenient where it shuts down the entire system. So the guys that were failing and going to the repo market in September are now like, oh, well, it wasn't that we ran the company broke. It was that there's a virus. It's not our fault. It's somebody else's fault. And so I just want to put that out there so you guys can have these conversations and be like, what is the real effect of printing currency out of thin air, completely thin air? And you wake up in the morning and the EU has announced $2 trillion, and a section of that's going to be more debt. So they can't pay the current debts, so they're going to add more debts. It's kicking the can down the road. So instead of allowing 20% failures now, 50% failures now, you're ensuring that you take down everybody in the entire ship. And that's what happens. And then you have to have some sort of major event to make it all better. It's not our fault, it's China's fault. It wasn't America's fault, it wasn't your congressman's fault, it wasn't your local mayor's fault, it wasn't Delta's fault, it was China's fault. That way we can all get together and do what human beings always do, which is go to war. People now are like, Trav, that's a little insane. Like, no, people don't understand that, like, the cost of going to that war, we're already broke. So once we get involved in something that we can't stop funding, because if you lose, you're screwed. Like, once you go kill off so many Chinese and they're pissed, you can't just stop. You got to win. The thing is, you and me and those Chinese guys making our iPhones over there and stuff, we got no beef. We probably all get together and have a beer or whatever they drink, do whatever. Like, we got no beef. But the governments, they got beef. And they're going to have beef to stay in power. And so I put that out just to think about it. Because I think the issue is the U.S. government and the Chinese government, and I think the U.S. people and the Chinese people have no beef with each other, but I think that we all got plenty of reason to have beef with them, and them being government. Not that I'm making any impact, but I just want to share that so that the conversation is there, because the conversation several years from now will be capitalism was the problem. We need more control of the economy. We need more control of the money. We need more control of people. They spread viruses. And that is something that's very hard to get rid of. Having that capitalism hashtag, the next one was capitalism kills, hashtag capitalism kills. So something to think about. Because when you don't have capitalism, because we don't have capitalism, we have socialism, we have crony capitalism. Delta's not a capitalism. That's freaking fraud. But it's going to be easy to go, hey, these guys, these capitalists, these CEOs, these banks, these capitalism, what else is it, you know? It's going to be very easy to go, we don't need any more of that. We need more control. We need government airlines. We need government railroads. We need government telecommunications. And in America, people are like, nah, I don't think it'll go like that. It doesn't take but one generation to go like that. So think about that and think about, well, if you're not able to change the direction of where things are going, if you They're like, yeah, I can't really change the fact that they're going to create currency out of thin air. You do have to start hedging and going, okay, well, what does that look like 10 years from now? And how do you survive it? Because ultimately, socialism, Marxism, all that fails too. That goes into total collapse. But it's very, very violent process. Socialism and communism is very violent. Capitalism, not so much. Hey, ride on my airline. We're better than them. We'll give you a better price. We'll give you better service. We'll serve you. We'll do whatever. We'll put you as the customer, as a consumer, because you vote with your dollar. So we will change our actions to suit you. That's what capitalists want to do. Apple wants to win your business. So they want to create things that create value for you. The government doesn't give a shit about winning your business. They want your money, they want your taxes, and if you don't give it to them, they will show up to your house with guns, and good luck fighting that. You guys to a digital currency shortly, and then we won't have to show up to your house because we'll just be able to move your money around, your currency around as we see fit, and you won't have any control. Unless you're outside the system. And when that occurs, I will be 100% out of the system. I'll be 100% out, off grid, 100%. Got no desire to hang out and see how bad this goes. Didn't work out well in the Soviet Union. Didn't work out well anywhere unless you're an absolute killer of a human being. Does it work out well for you?